Whenever you present the clear historical timelines we have uncovered so far, the New Age narrative is forced to retreat. Once it becomes obvious that the Gnostic texts are late-date, 2nd century fictions, critics must resort to their final, most aggressive line of defense. They will claim that the entire Bible is a product of a centuries-long game of telephone. They will tell you that over thousands of years, ancient monks, kings, and scribes constantly altered, edited, and corrupted the Old Testament texts. They claim these changes were made to intentionally plant fake prophecies that would make Jesus look like God. This is the ultimate conspiracy theory of modern spirituality. It relies entirely on the assumption that we have no physical connection to the ancient world and that we must blindly trust whatever version of the text has been handed down to us. But today, we are going to step out of the realm of theory and step directly into the dirt of archaeology. We are going to examine the physical time capsules that completely shatter this conspiracy theory, proving that the Old Testament prophecies were locked in stone and immune to later corruption, centuries before Jesus was even born. Our archaeological investigation begins in the year 1947 in the rugged, barren desert cliffs overlooking the northwest shore of the Dead Sea, near a site called Qumran. A young Bedouin shepherd threw a rock into a small opening in a cave cliff and heard the sound of breaking pottery. When he climbed inside, he stumbled upon the greatest archaeological find of the 20th century. Hidden inside clay jars were hundreds of ancient leather and papyrus scrolls that had been completely sealed away from the outside world for 2,000 years. Between 1947 and 1956, archaeologists searched 11 different caves in the area, uncovering roughly 900 ancient Jewish manuscripts. Among these were more than 200 biblical scrolls, containing portions of every single book of the Old Testament except for the book of Esther. To understand why this discovery completely derailed the New Age narrative, you have to understand what the historical landscape looked like before 1947. Before the scrolls were found, the oldest surviving complete Hebrew manuscript of the Old Testament was a text called the Aleppo Codex, which dates back to around 930 AD. Skeptics and mystics argued that because there was a massive 1,000-year gap between the time of Jesus and our oldest Hebrew copy, later Christians had plenty of time to alter the text and insert fake messianic prophecies. The Dead Sea Scrolls acted like a physical time machine that closed that gap instantly. Scientists subjected the scrolls to rigorous radiocarbon dating and advanced handwriting analysis. The results were undeniable. The biblical manuscripts found in the Qumran caves conclusively date to a range between 300 BC and 68 AD. Think about what that means historically. These scrolls were hidden in dark desert caves long before the first Christian was ever born, long before the New Testament was written, and long before the Council of Nicaea. They represent a pure, unadulterated snapshot of the Hebrew Bible exactly as it existed in antiquity, entirely out of the reach of later church editors. The crowning jewel of the entire discovery was a text known as the Great Isaiah Scroll, uncovered in Cave 1. Unlike most of the other finds, which were broken into tiny fragments, the Great Isaiah Scroll was found almost completely intact. It is a massive 24-foot roll of sheepskin containing the entire book of Isaiah from start to finish. The handwriting and material analysis date this specific scroll to around 125 BC. When scholars unrolled this ancient treasure, they did something incredible. They placed it side by side with the standard Hebrew Bibles we use today to check for errors, alterations, and corruption over the last 2,000 years. What they discovered stunned the academic world. The text was practically identical. Sentence for sentence, the prophecies were unchanged. Aside from minor spelling variations, the ancient equivalent of writing the word color versus color with a U, there was absolutely no structural difference. The text that predicted the Messiah would be born of a virgin called Mighty God and pierced for our transgressions was perfectly preserved. The theory that the Old Testament was corrupted or rewritten by the early church is a scientific and historical impossibility. If the Dead Sea Scrolls were not enough, history provides a second, completely independent checkpoint that completely eliminates any possibility of later text manipulation. It is a translation known as the Septuagint. In the 3rd century BC, the Greek ruler of Egypt, Ptolemy II, wanted to gather all the world's knowledge into the famous Library of Alexandria. He commissioned 72 elite Jewish scholars to translate the Hebrew Torah and the rest of the prophets into Greek, which was the international language of the day. This Greek translation of the Old Testament was completed between 285 BC and 132 BC. This is a vital piece of the puzzle, because the Septuagint was translated and widely distributed across the entire Mediterranean world centuries before Christ. It serves as a permanent public historical record. Christians could not have altered texts like Isaiah chapter 7, verse 14, because those Greek manuscripts were already sitting in secular libraries from Rome to Egypt, generations before Jesus was born. The prophetic blueprint was locked in the public domain. When you look at the physical, archaeological evidence, the timeline of the New Age movement completely collapses into dust. The New Age narrative relies on a backward timeline. It wants you to believe that vague mysticism and Gnostic energy came first, and that the rigid, prophetic, historical Bible was invented later by corrupt leaders. But archaeology has drawn a line in the sand. The Dead Sea Scrolls and the Septuagint prove that the strict, highly specific, prophetic theology of the Old Testament was fully formed, widely distributed, and perfectly preserved centuries before Christ. The environment Jesus walked into was not a soup of fluid New Age Gnosticism. It was a concrete historical reality built entirely on the rock-solid foundation of ancient Hebrew scripture. Science and archaeology have spoken. The conspiracy theory of a corrupted Old Testament is dead. We have physical, undeniable proof that the texts we read today are the exact same texts that existed centuries before Jesus ever walked the earth. This leaves us standing face to face with the most explosive part of our entire investigation. If the Old Testament really was perfectly preserved, and if those ancient prophecies truly were locked in ink centuries before the birth of Christ, what exactly did those ancient prophets predict about the identity of the coming Messiah? Find out in episode 6.